Sun and Mood Reads. Hello everyone, welcome. So today I am going to do a review, just share my thoughts on the book Rebecca by Daphne Du Maurier. I was originally going to just include this review with my wrap up for October, but I realized I was probably going to say quite a bit about this book. I think there's enough material, enough discussion to just make it one separate video. If I add this review with the 5 other books that I read in October, it's just going to be a really long video. So I think I'm just going to divide it and do separate review videos for each book, which I haven't done before. Feels like it's a lot of pressure actually, because if you're just reviewing one book, I feel like there just needs to be thoughtfully planned out and might need to say things in detail and sound clever and shit, which I don't know if that's gonna happen, but let's give it a go. Okay, so Rebecca has been a long-running joke with me and my husband. This book has been on my bedside table for years. I have been meaning to read it ever since I first read Jane Eyre, which was 13 years ago. So it's taken me 13 years to finally read this. Why has it taken me so long? My expectation for this book has been so high because I was told time and time again that, oh, you love Jane Eyre. Well, if you love Jane Eyre, you will love Rebecca. Try Rebecca, because if you love Jane Eyre, you will love Rebecca. You will love Rebecca if you love Jane Eyre. Time and time again. That can only cause anxiety, and it did. Honestly, those people who said that to me, my friends, family members, Google, you know who you are. All I've got to say is stop it. Stop saying that. Because it just delayed me from reading it. I was comparing it to Jane Eyre when I hadn't even read it yet. And stop saying it because there aren't that many similarities at all. Maybe 1 or 2 elements, but completely different books. Anyway, I'm going to go into that a little bit later, but let's talk about this book. So this story is set in Cornwall in England for most of the book, but starts in Monte Carlo. We meet a young woman with no family who is basically hired by this wealthy socialite to just hang. In Monte Carlo, she meets Maxim de Winter, who is a wealthy widower and owns the prestigious manor estate, the Mandalay in England. They fall in love and Maxim, on a whim, proposes to her and they marry and head on back to the Mandalay estate. Maxim de Winter has been a widower for about a year by the time they come back. His late wife's name is Rebecca. The new Mrs. De Winter is haunted by this Rebecca. Her presence, she's just everywhere in the house. And she's not getting many clear answers as to what happened to Rebecca, how she died exactly, what was she like. There's a lot of questions unanswered. So begins this mysterious, suspenseful, very unnerving journey. There's a bit of a renaissance with this book at the moment because the film adaptation came out on Netflix, which I will go into later on as well. I am so glad that I finally, after 13 years, read this book because it was brilliant. It says here it's the classic tale of romantic suspense. I don't know, it is suspenseful, it's a mystery. Yeah, romantic, yeah, I guess, but for me, that's not the biggest thing that I got out of it, but I can definitely see why it is a classic. It was creepy as and had me on the edge of my seat. Absolutely immersive, atmospheric. One of the most atmospheric books that I've read for a very long time. Daphne Du Maurier wrote this in 1938. It doesn't read like it was written then. It reads quite modern in my opinion. But yeah, honestly, so many goosebump moments reading this. Like I said, what stood out for me the most, what I absolutely loved, was the writing. It was so atmospheric, so immersive, very haunting, suspenseful tone. This just permeated throughout the whole story. You were absolutely drenched in this sensory experience of being at the Mandalay estate. The characters are very well realised. The protagonist, Mrs. De Winter, Maxim, and I really liked how their depiction really just stayed true to the ugly truth of the situation. I don't think Daphne was writing these characters with the intention for the readers to love them necessarily and root for them. Well, I definitely wasn't. And I think this is what serviced the unsettling nature of the story. And oh, Mrs. Danvers. Oh my God, Mrs. Danvers. She's freaking creepy. That scene when the new Mrs. De Winter is introduced to Mrs. Danvers, I was breaking out in cold sweat, like just chills down my spine. And speaking of the protagonist, and she narrates the story in the first person. And what I'm about to say is definitely not a spoiler. If you Google Rebecca, this is one of the aspects that is discussed. But I personally loved finding this feature out for myself. So if you just want to go into Rebecca without knowing anything, I would skip a couple of minutes ahead, but it definitely isn't a spoiler. So I was reading Rebecca, I was probably about quarter to halfway through. I was just really loving just being in the mind of this Mrs. De Winter. Her insecurities and just her personality was just really precise and clear. And I wanted to make a note of that in my book. So I started kind of going back on the previous pages to try to look for her name. And I was like, oh, where's her name? What's her first name? What's the protagonist's first name? Oh my God, what is it? And then I realized we never ever find out the first name of the narrator, Mrs. De Winter. Like, we never ever find out her name. What a genius choice for the writer to make. And the fact that the book is called Rebecca, it just really added to the narrator's feeling of insecurity, of just not knowing where she stands, not knowing herself, and being just shrouded basically in the past and presence of this dead wife, Rebecca. When I realized that aspect of this book, I just thought, oh, that's so good. I have read many mysteries and thrillers and suspenseful books like this before, but I still did not expect for this story to go down the path that it went down. It was really like jaw-dropping. The turning point and the revelations in this story, I was just like, whoa, okay, yeah, I did not see that coming at all, which is always a delight. So yeah, I loved this book, and I am just so angry that it took me 13 years to finally read this. And the only reason I kick myself up the bum to finally read this is because the Netflix film adaptation was coming out. So I thought, this is definitely one of the books I want to have read before I see any kind of film adaptation. So that's why I read it. But my God, I really shouldn't have bothered. That movie, honestly, I maybe got through about 40% of it. I was like, oh no, I can't do it. I can't do it. It was just a very washed out Hollywood version of the story. I don't know where the suspenseful tones, the mystery, just that mood that Daphne Du Maurier did so well in the book. I don't know where it went. I mean, honestly, it is the most atmospheric writing. The clues, the information, the detail, it's all in there. Like, how could you just like read this and go, nah, gonna take that out, gonna take that out, gonna take that out. They just took the complete essence of Rebecca out. And it was just very miscast as well. Like Lily James, I absolutely adore. She was just wrong. She was just wrong for this role. Way too knowing and pretty and giddy. So was Arnie Hammer. Is that his name? Arnie Hammer. Just way too golden boy, you know. They're just not the faces or the interpretation that I had in mind. The woman who played Mrs. Danvers, the Mrs. Danvers just came across like she had just a chip on her shoulder, like she was just a bit bitter. That scene in the story when Mrs. De Winter meets Mrs. Danvers for the first time, I knew that scene was going to be make or break for me in the movie, and boy did it break. It was just like, I just cannot believe that in this day and age, with all the effects and the brilliant directors around, like I just can't believe that it just fizzled. For what it's worth, which is probably not even 2 cents, I would like to share with you what my dream ultimate adaptation would have been of Rebecca if I had a spare $100 million up my sleeve. Okay, Rebecca, produced by Sun Pesmenti. Mrs. De Winter would have been a no-brainer. It would have been Saoirse Ronan. Come on, Saoirse Ronan, how could it not be? Like, she would have been absolutely perfect. She would have played the subtleties, the vulnerabilities. It should have been Saoirse. Maxim de Winter should have been played by Richard Armitage, someone who was a little bit more classic and a little bit more brooding. He would have played the mystery really well. Or another option for Maxim de Winter, and I don't know why I thought of him, but for some reason his image, his face came into mind when I was reading, and it is Rodrigo Santoro. You would remember him from Love Actually, the guy at the office that really is in love with Laura Linney's character. Yeah, I think that would have been a really cool, exotic interpretation of Maxim de Winter. And Mrs. Danvers, definitely two that I would have cast. One could have been Tilda Swinton. Like, seriously, she just needs to stand there and stare at you and just like, God, goosebumps. She would have been an amazing Mrs. Danvers. And the other actress that I thought would have been brilliant, and seriously, when I say this actress's name, you cannot deny that she would have been a bloody brilliant Mrs. Danvers, Viola Davis. Could you imagine Viola Davis? Like, ooh, she would have set the mood. And lastly, I think the director should have been, oh no, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Guillermo del Toro or Guillermo del Toro. He directed Pan's Labyrinth, The Shape of Water. Like, could you imagine his vision for Rebecca? It would have just been dark, creepy, suspenseful, everything that was spelled out here in the book. Hello. Or another great director I think would have been, oh, who was the director for Get Out? Was it Jordan Peele who actually wrote it? Yeah, Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele would have been a pretty unique but brilliant choice for Rebecca. That's my dream adaptation, which will never happen. And we probably won't see another adaptation for maybe another 30 years. What a shame. What a wasted opportunity. So I just want to quickly go back to, you know, the comparisons between Jane Eyre and Rebecca. I could maybe see one or two little elements that were similar, but they are just two completely different classics. It says here, Du Maurier is in a class by herself, and she really is, and so is Charlotte Bronte. Like, there shouldn't be any comparisons there at all. My answer to the question, if I liked Jane Eyre, should I read Rebecca? I would answer that with, well, it really depends what aspects of Jane Eyre that you loved, and is that what you are seeking in Rebecca? For example, if it is that suspenseful, gothic, manor mystery atmosphere read that you're after, then yeah, you will definitely get that from Rebecca. But the span of Jane Eyre's story is so many more years. It's from when she's 9 years old to when she's like 19 or something. So it's about 10 years, whereas Rebecca, I think it's maybe not even a year. And that whole suspenseful gothic mystery vibe is throughout the whole story. Yeah, whereas the gothic suspenseful atmosphere is only really one aspect of Jane Eyre from the time when she goes to live at Thornfield Hall. Are you wanting to read Rebecca because you loved the romance aspect of Jane Eyre and just that relationship with Jane and Edward Rochester? If that's what you're after, then in my opinion, I would say no, don't read Rebecca if that's what you're after, because for me, I fell in love with Jane Eyre, and I fell in love with that flawed but intense relationship that she had with Rochester. For me, that wasn't the focal point of the story in Rebecca, like the relationship between Mrs. De Winter and Maxim. I think the focal point in that relationship was the mystery behind what happened to Rebecca. They love each other, yes, but it's a different experience that you have as a reader when you're immersed in their relationship. Yeah, so I'd say no to that. No, if that is the only reason. But there are so many other brilliant reasons why you should read Rebecca. Do you want to read Rebecca because what you loved about Jane Eyre was the strong, enduring female protagonist who inspired you? If that's why you want to read it, and this may be a little bit biased, so take it with a grain of salt, but in my opinion, no, I wouldn't read it just for that reason. Because the protagonist in this story, I believe, is intriguing. You definitely go on that emotional journey with her, but I wouldn't say that the choices that she made in the journey, I wouldn't say they were inspiring, but it was still very intriguing, very interesting, very thought-provoking. But I didn't come out of this story going, I'm so inspired by this no-name Mrs. De Winter. You know, that wasn't the focal point for me. So no. So as you can see, like it's obviously going to be different for everyone. It's all subjective. All in all, read Rebecca with absolutely no comparison or connection to Jane Eyre at all, because as it says, Du Maurier is in a class by herself. So read it because it is a brilliant, suspenseful, atmospheric classic. And yeah, don't wait 13 years like I did. Read it now. I feel like my thoughts, my discussion about Rebecca has been very sporadic. Hopefully I can edit it so it makes sense. Did any of you guys out there read this? If you have, just, yeah, comment below. I'd love to have a discussion. And was it just me, or have there been others that have been told, read Rebecca if you love Jane Eyre, or vice versa? Maybe it was just me and I just made a big deal out of it for nothing. But yeah, let me know. Thanks for joining me. My name is Sun. This is Sun and Mood Reads. Please subscribe if you feel compelled to, and I will see you next time. Bye. Sun and Mood Reads.